Welcome back to Dads to the Future, a podcast where we talk all about our lives as dads. I'm here with the anti-Grinch, Mr. Jimmy Schaffman. Schaff, how you doing today?
I was gonna say anti. I'll take it. I'll take it. I'm good. How are you, sir? How are you, Cindy Luvactor?
Ooh-wee. I'm doing excellent because Christmas just happened, and we're going to talk about our Christmases, including Clemson Tiger himself, Mr. Kevin Call. How you doing today, sir?
I thought you guys were going to call me Max. I guess somebody's going to be the dog from the Grinch. For me. Max!
But what will I wear?
That's great.
Side note: did either of you see the animated Grinch that they did a couple of years ago? The CG
Benedict Cumberbatch
one
version?
Yes,
Yeah,
Benedict Cumberbatch.
yeah. Illumination
No.
Studios. We love it. It's
Interesting
really good.
that
Yeah.
the Jim Carrey Grinch is the one that most people like. That's what my in-laws put on at Christmas time. That's what a lot of people think of as the Grinch. But I'm starting to think that Illumination one is the better one to number one to show my son. Like that's the one that he loves. But as just the current Grinch version, I think that CG one is the one that I would put on over the Jim Carrey Grinch,
I'll
which is
go
now
even
20
old
years
school.
old.
My kids watched the Boris Karloff 25-minute Dr. Seuss animated one from like our childhood, maybe even before we were born. I don't know how old it is, but like they loved it. They liked that. Every time it was like put on the Grinch, it was like, no, not that one. No, not that one. That one. And so yeah, that was the one that ran through our house this Christmas. The Jim Carrey one freaked Christian out. He did not like that.
Yeah, it's too scary for my girls.
He thought it was weird. Yeah.
The faces. Yeah. Well, let's talk about that when we talk about our holidays in this episode.
Mhm.
But to start things off, Mr. Jimmy Schaffman, as he always does, perusing through social media, through Instagram and TikTok, he always finds little nuggets of wisdom and little things that he passes on to us. So Schaff, in his infinite wisdom, struck gold, as he always does, and found this millennial dads study that said millennial dads are spending 3 times the amount of time with their kids as their dads. And we're going to link in the show notes the research and the actual study that went with it. But I thought that Schaff, you hit that right on the head because you and I hosted a Star Trek podcast, and we had a segment on that Star Trek podcast called Boldly Dadding, where we talked about our own fathers' experiences. And I had a specific incident. See, Kevin, you weren't around for this, so this will be new for you and for our audience. My father-in-law.
But I got to sit through it again. Gosh. I'm just kidding.
My father-in-law, we were over at the house. This was when my son was 1 year old, and it was time to change the diaper. And I was going to change it. And he was like, "You change diapers?" And to me, that was like, huh? Like, that's a question. That's something that is not normal to you. And he was like, "I've never changed a diaper in my life." And he's like 60 years old. And I'm like, whoa, there's a definite generational thing here that this is not normal to him. And to me, my wife and I, whoever's there is changing the diaper. It's not like my wife is waiting. I'm waiting for my wife to get home to change the diaper. It's
Right,
like
this poor kid. It's just like
He's
sagging and sagging.
So I think this was a great study that Shaw found, and it really highlights, like I said, the difference in the generations thinking, the millennials versus the baby boomers versus Gen X. We don't really have a Gen X representative here. Kevin, I wish we had our buddy Adam Joyner here to talk about it because he's a great dad. And what is the Gen X viewpoint? But us millennials, we have this viewpoint that we can say, I think it's normal to spend as much time with my son as possible, and changing the diaper goes right along with that. So I thought this was a great topic, Schaff, and
Thank you.
that is something that I really wanted to get into with all of you. What are kind of the things that you look at as normal to you that maybe your father didn't think that was normal? Kevin, do you have any personal experience with my dad didn't necessarily do that, or my grandfather, this is something that was weird to them. To me, it's normal.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the things I think about, like my dad, he was a military brat, so he didn't serve in the military, but was in a military family. For those who know the term military brat, Factor, you are a military brat. Traveled around all across the world.
I'm just a brat.
Me too.
With a Z.
And but my grandfather, right? He was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and that generation, that golden generation as they call it, fought in World War II, and my grandfather fought in Korea and had an opportunity to go into Vietnam and stuff, but chose to retire and become a civilian contractor. That generation was always about the children are to be seen, not heard. And my dad carried that into how we were raised, my brother and myself and my sister. And it was always like when they would have parties or people at the house, it's like, go upstairs, and, like, just don't be seen, don't be heard sometimes. And then if you were to be seen, it was like almost like the Von Trapps, like you had to come to the door. I remember, for all you Gen Zers out there that have no idea what a landline phone was like, and even pre-caller ID, you used to be taught like, hey, like, and announce yourself when you're answering the phone. Like, so we used to say,
oh yeah,
call residence, Kevin Call speaking.
Yes.
We were taught to do those things when somebody called. Oh, hello, Kevin. Is your dad home?
You've reached the call
things like
center.
Yeah. Hi, you've reached the call residence call center. Press 1 for fuck off. No, I'm just kidding. But that was the, some of those things that do not carry into my raising of my children, was specifically the be seen, not heard approach to parenting. So we can talk more about that as the conversation goes. But that's one that when I thought about this article and sort of how it talked about millennial dad approaches, and I think it all resonates under the piece in the article that talks about how millennial dads are focusing more on emotionally connecting with their children, and whereas the Gen X dads and even the ones prior to them, which my dad's a baby boomer, he it was more of the provider role, right? And the stereotypes that go with that. Hey, I provide, the wife is at home rearing the children, those kind of things. So yeah, I could see how it was a shock to your father-in-law, like, he's changing a diaper, holy shit.
And like I said, it was such a shock to me to hear him say that. And in my mind, it was like the record scratch, like, what? And then in reality, it's like nobody is even noticing. But it was like, whoa, that is so weird to me that his experience is that different from my own. Shoff, do you have any experiences like that where you found out, wait, the other generation is not like me?
Every day. No. Well, so I want to preface this. I think this is important. I think we've kind of touched on it a little bit. The dynamic was different, right? For like our parents' generation, as Kevin was indicating and talking about the provider role, that's still present nowadays, but maybe it's not necessarily the husband in the relationship who's the provider. That could be a total swap, which is awesome to see. But also the nature of how things were, there were more defined traditional roles that I think a lot of our parents sort of adopted, and that's all they knew because that's all they saw of their parents. And so I think as each generation continues to sort of reinvent the wheel a little bit, all of those gender norms are going to get merged and messed with to the point where there is no true gender role, just the responsibilities of a parent and who is most available at that one moment to do that. It's kind of how it is.
Well, especially with the cost of living, with the price of inflation and everything, it's basically mandatory for two people to work nowadays. They have two incomes in the household. That's
I have a stat.
huge difference.
I have a stat on this Pew
Oh, really?
Research.
Tell us.
According to Pew Research, 46% of households with children under 18 had two working parents in 2022 compared to 31% in the 1970s.
Yeah.
So, like, I think the idea of increased workforce participation by both parents is one of probably the root causes of leading to this shift in how millennial parents are choosing to raise their kids, because they don't you could have a traditional home if the wife was not working and could her job was to rear the children and to take care of the home and to cook and to clean and all those things that we make fun of maybe today because it seems like WandaVision episode 1 or something like that, but it was what it was. And my grandparents, that's how they did it, and they were great people. I don't judge. Because my grandmother also, just not to get on a tangent, like she was, her mother, my great grandmother, like they lived in New York during the Great Depression. My great grandmother was a working mom who was the secretary of the Chase Manhattan Bank at that time and spoke 7 languages. So she was kind of, there's a little bit of anomaly there. So like her mother worked and provided, and because her dad died at an early age, things like that. So I think there's circumstance that I think has to also be treated very individually when I see these type of things. Yeah. We don't know everybody's circumstances, and there's certainly a lot of generalization that we can make. My circumstances are very different than you all's, or y'all, as we say here in the South. But yeah, I do think that like the increased workforce participation definitely has created a shift. My dad, he traveled. That's what he did. He was in sales. He traveled. He was always on the road. He was home on the weekends, and when he was home, he was mowing the lawn, and fixing stuff, and then got back on the road. So like I learned how to tie a tie from my grandfather. I learned how to do more things probably from my mom than I did my dad. Things like that. So and I don't blame him for that. I'm not getting into therapy here. He had to do what he had to do. But I think we also benefit, and we talked about this in our show prep, and I'll shut up. But like, I think our generation also benefits from like, we have more technology today than our parents did, than the Gen X parents did. We have opportunities to be remote, which puts us working in the home while our children are here and our spouse is here. That's my situation. My wife works remotely. I work remotely. So we're around our kids more. And I think when you're around your kids, which you want to be, at least hope you would want to be, you can be more nurturing. My dad didn't have that choice to be nurturing because he was always on the road. And when we got back, he had to do stuff. And so it made it hard to like sit down on the floor and play. Which there's, again, studies on that, like with men, when they sit down and play on the floor with their kids, there's oxytocin that gets released, and there's like a chemical like merging that happens, right? Similar to a mother breastfeeding their child. So like there's tons of new information too. I think we're in the information age, obviously, right? With the internet and things like that. We know more about what hasn't worked and what doesn't work and things like that. So I think there's a lot of that too. So anyway, Rev Kev out. I'm done.
What I was going to get to is, some of the things that I recall that like the roles in the household, definitely like bath time. That's one thing like for myself is totally different. Like growing up, it was always my mom, like my mom was always in charge of, bath time and dinner time. And, she was the one at home. My dad was working. He would work late hours. So unfortunately for him, when he would come home, he would more or less get like, okay, this is what the kids did, and then he would be sort of left with no other option but to be sort of like the judge, jury, executioner of sorts. And then there would be, he'd have to sort of like exact that punishment of sorts. And so that was always a difficult part because I wasn't getting so much of like my dad and I have a much better relationship now, but like back then it was, you don't see him that much. And then when he is here, he's dealing out, what, like if we were not the best kids if we were acting up, breaking lamps, which we did way too many times, then he would, have to lay the smack down. And that was another, dynamic that's not present anymore either, right? Like it's the idea of consequence and discipline, all of that looks different as millennial dads too. So it's interesting to me, like we talk about diapers and stuff, but I think it's also really fascinating that mothers have been doing this since the dawn of time and do not get the proper credit. It's like we're tipping our hat to millennial dads because they're willing to change diapers and pull-ups and be around kids, the kids that they helped make, right? But like mothers do this daily. They have a million different responsibilities and roles, and they still have far more roles regarding child rearing versus what fathers do, and they don't get any credit for it. Like I'll change a pull-up.
That's right.
I'll have my two daughters with me. I'll be in a Barnes and Noble, and I'll like rush into the bathroom, and I'll be changing pull-ups and helping one go potty on the potty, and I'll come out with my hands full, diaper bag, and both kids, and I'll get looks from strangers like just saying like, "Wow, what a good dad! Like he did, like he's managing it, he's doing." I'm like, no mom would get the same reaction coming out of a bathroom stall at Barnes and Noble. So like really, although we're doing a lot more, we millennial dads still have a long way to go. I'm just glad that we're scratching the surface and making the necessary changes to level the playing field and show that these roles are not defined by gender. These roles are defined by how involved you want to be. It's based on your own desire.
I'm so glad you brought that point up about it's to me, and I don't want to go down this political road of identity politics and things like that, like to me, or gender politics, because to me, like that doesn't matter to me. Like at the end of the day, like if you have kids, you make a choice, and you make a choice to either parent them or you don't, and to be present or don't, right? Like that's the job. That's what you signed up for, accident or not. That's what you signed up for. And so with that comes that, and to me, it all buckets under the responsibility element of it. There's a responsibility there to be present. And I'm not saying that the Gen X people weren't because of their circumstances or whatever. That's not where I'm going. I'm just saying that like now, I think there's just a lot more effort put up by men to be more present in their children's lives. And I think that's a huge thing that hopefully impacts the next generation. Because when you look throughout history, wars where men go off and fight, now you have men and women that go off and fight wars, obviously, but traditionally back through history, it was the men, right? And they wouldn't come back. And so the only thing the wife had to do was go find another guy, and that's how it all worked. But like today it's men stepping up. That's the way I look at it. And I think that's the good thing. And I think more and more people see that. I think it changes the hearts of men. And I think that is really where we need to be as a society, is men's hearts changing, because there's so much about this world that has been dictated by men, where women have become commoditized, children have become victims, and we live in this world where it just becomes toxic. In my opinion, OnlyFans should not exist, but somehow men have created a world where that's okay, and so I think hopefully
is now a good time for me to plug my OnlyFans account. Just checking.
Please. We'll check that.
Okay. I'm just kidding.
But my point being is like, I think that where I get in this is that it shouldn't be about gender equality, and it shouldn't be about identity politics or gender politics. Because like, you're right. Nobody's going to give my wife a round of applause for wrangling two boys at a Chick-fil-A at 7:00 at night after school. But they may be like, "Hey, you're doing a real good job. Bless your heart." Like if it was me, and I've had that happen too. And I'm just sitting there thinking the same thing. So it's kind of like, it shouldn't be about that. It should be like, hey, these people are investing in their children's lives, and that's what matters. So,
yeah, I think dads get like seen and respected. Moms get shamed and rejected.
Yeah.
which is
like
what
or
sucks.
judged, right? Or in judge,
Yeah,
like, oh,
yeah,
she's spanked her kids, or worse, she's not doing anything.
yeah.
Like she's a horrible mother. Did she not go to that class that we all went to? And then there's the comparison trap, and then all the therapy that goes into all that. Jeez. But yeah. Anyway,
Well, it's interesting you talked about seeing those representations and changing men's hearts. We see that not only in our own homes themselves. So the kids growing up today are going to see it in their dads and their
that's
parents,
right.
but then they're also going to see it in the pop culture that they're consuming right
Hmm.
now, because the stuff that we're seeing today is much more in line, I think, with that current millennial sensibility. And you could even go back to like a little bit older generation of Finding Nemo, when you saw Marlin's dad and how he had to be a single father and be protective of his son while doing that. We see it in today's Mandalorian. That's still a TV show that's airing right now. There's a movie coming out where
Love
he's
it.
not a traditional biological father, but he is a surrogate father to Grogu. He takes him in as his own son, basically, but he's kind of having to balance these things out as a single father, like as no one else to share that responsibility with. And to him, it's normal to care for Grogu. To he didn't necessarily start off that way, but he got to the point where it was like, I will die for this child. This is the only thing that matters to me right now
We
is
will all die
Grogu's
for
safety.
Grogu.
And I think, and I'm glad you brought up the Mandalorian, because that was going to be, I was going to bring it up later, but I think like that was my example of how a millennial dad can still have that quote traditional stereotypical masculinity, that that I'm not talking Conan the Barbarian, Arnold Schwarzenegger type, yes, we got to kill it. If it bleeds, kill it. But like, go kill a deer.
What does he do?
Yeah. Go, you are soft. You lack discipline. You're my mommy. No. Anyway, Kindergarten Cop, great movie. But where I was going with this is that I like the Mandalorian being able to have that balance between that masculinity. Like he's a warrior; he could kill you with with a stare, essentially. But he has that vulnerability. That scene where he doesn't want to let Grogu go at the end of season 2, and stuff like that, and that longing after he's let him go and missing him, and that piece of his life, and the reconnection that they have later on. It's so great. And like, I think millennial dads, you can be a butch, go throw axes, chop trees down, shoot deer, whatever you want to do, man. Work on cars if that's your definition of masculinity, or play video games or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And still have vulnerability in front of your kids. I the other day I literally sat in front of Christian and Callan, my 2 boys, and I said, guys, I failed today. I did not do a good job being your dad today. I yelled, I screamed, I shouted. I just, not a great day for me. And I think that's important, not just for boys especially, but for any kid, to see their parents as not perfect people,
Yeah.
as imperfect people. Like when my wife and I fight or argue, like the one thing they're going to see is us apologize.
Yeah.
Like that's important, because that's how I want them to see. Like, hey, you're going to get in fights. It's how you make up that matters.
Well, the fact that you even
so,
talked with them, that's so great, because that's
Yeah.
it's referred to as a repair conversation. And
that's right. Yeah.
And that's so crucial. That is so crucial. And I'm so glad that you had that moment with them. So that's really solid.
Yeah. Yeah, but going
Nice
back
work,
to the
Dad.
pop culture piece, I just think that like the Mando and Nemo, like they all are examples of like really great balances of masculinity and the traditional masculinity, and also vulnerability. And I think that's where we as men, I think going back to the heart statement, that's how our hearts change, is to allow yourself to be vulnerable, not rub some dirt on it. And,
Right. That's 100% correct. And I think with that changing sensibility and the changing of the times, we're seeing things like Modern Family, where it's not just necessarily a single dad or a single parent, but you have these different mixes of blended families and
Mhm.
divorces and things are, all of these different things in a modern family specifically, and you're seeing that there's vulnerability in
Like
the way
Jay's
that they're
character
parenting.
in that show, like played by Ed O'Neill, like he's that traditional male actor, masculine actor, and he throughout the progression of that series, his heart changes because he gets an opportunity to kind of raise children again with his stepson Manny and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you guys' thoughts are, though. We were talking about Star Wars: The Mandalorian, transition to Skeleton Crew, which sort of has an opposite trope that we're seeing. Justin, do you want to talk a little bit about that and sort of what you're seeing with Skeleton Crew and Wim's dad?
Yeah, so I'm going to mispronounce the name. I'm sorry. The actor's name is Tunde Adebimpe, and he plays
Pimpe.
Wendell,
Oh.
Wim's dad. Who Wim, the actor, looks exactly like my son. So I have a connection to that character where I'm like, oh, I want him to be okay by the end of it
But your
because
beard
he
is
reminds
not
me
as
of my son.
immaculate as Wendell's. I'm sorry, I
That's
can't.
true. If I could grow
Yeah.
it that thick and that lush, I would. But I'm interested to see how the show ends because at the beginning we're given very little information about what happened before. Why is he a single dad? What happened to the mom? And then what is the circumstances around this planet that's maybe contributing to that, the way that the father is raising him. So I'm very curious to see. It's hard to say now, to halfway through the series or this season. Hopefully, it gets another season. Halfway through, judging the dad, like the only actions that we have so far are he's more like a traditional, like he's hard. You have to go to school, you have to get good grades, you have to do this, and that's the only way out of your situation. Like that's the only way you should behave, and not necessarily letting him be his own person, letting his creativity come out, letting his emotions come to the forefront. So I'm interested to see, are there other circumstances around his dad? Because we're already in the latest episode that we saw this week, we're seeing he cares about his son. That's not in question. It's not like he's a harsh dad and he just doesn't he hates his son. We've seen those type of depictions in pop culture before, but he definitely wants to get his son back. He's missing. Sometimes it takes that absence of the son to bring him back and like, oh, I actually, this is something that I should be fighting for. I should be doing anything that I can. And I
Mm-hmm.
really want to see if there's something else involved in that. But you bring up a great point. There are these, like the Norman Rockwell, the perfect family, the nuclear family, like you were talking about, the gender roles, the specific norms of this is what happens, Leave It to Beaver and all those classic ones. And then as it evolves into 80s, 90s, and then our current generation of dads, I love seeing that over the time of, you can look back at a snapshot of the Brady Bunch or Leave It to Beaver and
Mm-hmm.
see the way that dads, it's not like a one to one, that's how it was off camera, but you can definitely tell there was an ideal there, and there was something that the writers, the directors, everyone who was involved was saying, this is how we should be. We should be looking at this, right? And I'm always curious to see the psychology of, this is the way it should be done at this time point, and then how does that evolve from the 50s to the 2000s, and the way that it changes over time. So the Wendell character, I think, definitely embodies an older generation. And we talked off microphone about the Goldbergs, which is, it's a modern show, but it's set in our, when the time when we were growing up, kind of like the 80s. And
Mm-hmm.
what was the parenting style
So
back then?
Yeah, and Murray, he just walks in the door after a hard day's work and just pulls his pants off and goes and sits in his chair and turns the TV on and just doesn't want anything to do with his kids. And it's like,
Al
wow,
Bundy,
that's
same, like
yeah, yeah,
putting his
hand down
hand
the
in his
pants.
pants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Homer
will say
Simpson,
this:
even.
it is interesting. Like again, we don't know Wendell and his backstory and all of that. It'd be interesting to see how much of that comes out. But like, I've always thought this, just again in our society and history, and I said it earlier, war always has a massive, far-reaching impact in that eventually cascades its way into the home, right? And this is directly after the Galactic Civil War ends, right? Or pretty close to it. So like, is that just the massive impact that's like impacting Wendell and his ability to want to connect? Maybe he's, they used to use the term shell shocked, right? PTSD or whatever, or there's something else going on, right? We don't know, but like, it is interesting to think that, because I do know that there's a lot of men out there that can't relate to their children or don't know how because of those type of situations, which is why I said earlier, everybody's circumstances is unique and individual. So certainly this article generalizes based on a study, but it is interesting to think about those type of things, how much war and violence and things like that impacts all the way its way down to the home. It's
Yeah,
fascinating to talk about.
we grew up in kind of the late 80s, early 90s. Shoff, as a kid growing up in the 90s, what were kind of the shows that you were consuming, ingesting, and
Yeah.
seeing that parenting
So I
on
think
display?
I think indirectly we can attribute a lot of what makes us millennial dads from the shows we were watching as we were growing up as kids. And I think like TGIF is a big factor in all of that. Look
Love it.
at Family Matters, look at Step by Step, look at Full House. Full House is probably the best example because that's a situation where you don't really have a mom figure. Granted, you have Aunt Becky, and then they have kids a little bit later. They have the twins, right? But for Michelle, baby Michelle and Stephanie and DJ, right? They've got three dads essentially. They've got Danny, and then Uncle Joey and Uncle Jesse, and that's a really interesting thing because now you've got three dads who are going to be there for girls, for a family full of girls. And these dads don't always get it right, but they're definitely, their hearts are in the right place. And maybe not one of them can be there for everyone, but each of them has unique qualities that helps them relate to these girls and be there for them in a unique way. And I think like that show, whether or not we were aware of it at the time, but we absorbed the empathy that the show was communicating. And as dads, we're probably emulating to some degree what Danny Tanner and Uncle Jesse and Uncle Joey were doing back then. And now we're bringing it into the fold and into our families. And it just feels natural because it's what we grew up with. This is what we were subjected to. This is the kind of parenting that we know. And so this is how we can be there for our kids and be there in a very heart-centered and focused way. And so I think like Full House is a really great example of how we have been sort of steered in a direction leading towards fathers being much more involved. Plus, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that Disney movies categorically and almost completely deal with the loss of a parent in some either one or
parental
both
trauma. Yeah.
And how that either affects the child or how they grow or how they connect with their grown-ups and things like that. So I think like Disney has been doing its fair share as well for us as we grow up, like how we're there for our family no matter what our family looks like, because it could have two dads or two moms or one dad or one mom or no parents and you're or like there's so many different dynamics, and Disney has done at least a good enough job of portraying that. And so I think like that's another thing to look at from the millennial dads. We've got a lot of different facets and mediums of content out there that have sort of helped mold and shape us, not just our own past experiences that said, okay,
quick round
my
robin.
dad or my mom did this and I didn't really like that and I don't want to be this way, or vice versa, my parents did this and I absolutely want to make sure I do this with my kids too, so like we've got a lot of great things that are helping guide us towards a path of being there for our kids in a very real, respectful, and kind way. So
quick round robin, what is the dad character either today or from, like you brought up, from Full House, that you most emulate in your day-to-day life, or want to emulate in your day-to-day life? And I'll start because the answer has been brewing as you were talking, Shaw. Bluey's dad. It's the most popular kids show on TV right now, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. Callan would bust through the door here because it's his favorite show. but Bluey's dad. You never see him get angry at his kids, and if he does, it's almost in like a comedic way. And he wants to just be with them every single minute of the day, playing with them, and he comes up with these phenomenal games, and they're all teaching a lesson and things like that. And I'm thinking, like, gosh, how could I wish I could do that, like I wish I could do that. So I aspire to be Bandit Healer.
Nice. Schaff, big major Bluey fan. What's yours?
I was late to the Bluey party, no doubt. In fact, I think it was during Boldly Dadding when we were doing our Trek podcast that I had not seen Bluey at all, and I was unfairly judging Bluey. And now, after Kevin said Bandit as his ideal like role model dad, I don't know if I can top that. I think that if I can co-opt that character,
Do
I
it.
think I'm going to say Bandit as well, because every time I watch that show, I think to myself, man, why am that's what I want to be. And a lot of times I try to be, but I never quite nail it like Bandit does.
Nice.
And yeah,
that is like a more modern take on it, especially because the show's still going on. They're about to end. They just recently announced there's going to be a movie, and then that's it. But
oh man, that's heartbreaking.
when I was growing up, it was the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and
he's like
Uncle
Darth
Phil.
Vader.
Uncle
Him
Phil.
too. Yeah. Uncle Phil was a great father for his own
Phil.
children,
Oh,
and then
that's awesome.
also for his nephew, for Will, coming in. And there's that meme. There's that very famous scene where Will Smith is crying and like saying, "Why did my father want me?" And Uncle Phil is comforting him. And then there's many times throughout the show where Uncle Phil stands up for Will, like that's his own child, and that is inspiring to me. And it's also as uh, as a Black family, a positive portrayal of a male father figure in the 90s was very big, because we didn't see that. Most of the time in the 90s, we're seeing broken homes, the dad left, or he's in jail, he's violent, he's all these different things. And that is true to life. Like there's a lot of that going on in America at that time. But to see a positive role model, it's kind of like what I was talking about with the I Love Lucy's and the Leave It to Beavers. You want that ideal on the screen, because that is something we are aspiring to, and we're being hopeful, and we want our entertainment to show that. And I'm not saying completely erase it and say, "Oh, but this poverty doesn't exist," or these things aren't, you never see these things, so it's out of sight, out of mind. But I want to be able to be hopeful, to be optimistic, and to see this is a guy who is doing for his family what I want to do. And I had that in my own father, seeing it on a daily basis, but also in the entertainment, I was able to laugh at Fresh Prince. And then also there's like dramatic moments like the one I talked about, but you're able to laugh and to learn at the same time. So that's why I really think Uncle Phil is the one that I look to.
That's a great pick.
Yeah. So
that episode that you referenced stands out in my mind all the time, where Will Smith's crying and stuff. And I think I casually watch it every now and then when you need some inspiration. It's great.
That's
James
a
Avery was, just top-notch actor. Great TV actor, but man, he could have done a ton of stuff. Voice of Shredder, in case
yes,
he
did.
Well, I was gonna say,
so great.
When you said that, it made me think of Splinter as the Turtles' father, and he's not their biological father, but in every depiction, we always see Splinter as the wise teacher as well as father figure to the Turtles. They're willing to die for him. You see that in that very first Turtles movie, where Splinter gets kidnapped and it just emotionally wrecks them. So I really enjoy pop culture and analyzing all these things. Kevin, you brought up off mic This Is Us, which I have not watched. So,
Yeah.
could you tell us that This Is Us? What can we learn from that show?
I can touch on that too.
Oh, you
actually.
watched it?
Yeah,
too?
Shoff and I'll tag team this one. I'll kick it off and I'll hand it to Shoff real quick
Yeah.
because my wife was a bigger fan of that show than I was, and there was a certain point in that show where I kind of stopped watching because I just wasn't enjoying it as much without Milo Ventimiglia's character kind of being more as a secondary role, and I won't spoil as to why, but really enjoyed his portrayal of fatherhood because again, it's a modern show but set in different periods. Some of it's in current day and some of it is set in was it like the 70s 80s, is that right?
Yeah,
Shaw?
that sounds right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so Milo Ventimiglia's character is in the past, and so getting to see how he is handling being a father of two biological children, and one that was adopted who's also a black man, was fascinating to me. Or a black child and becomes a black man. Randall was just really, really neat, and how he tries to navigate all of that while being suffering from post-traumatic stress syndrome from Vietnam. Also, marrying a woman who is from the other side of the tracks in terms of the uptown girl, country clubber, all that kind of stuff, family of means, just is a really, really neat setup for a story. And I just thought like This Is Us is such a great way of putting us into that situation. And then how does that mold the three kids, Randall, Kevin, and I forgot what was the sister's name? Kate.
Yep.
Yeah. As they're now adults navigating their own lives. And I'm gonna hand Shoff the Randall baton because I think there's a lot to say there, because he really embraces not only what a millennial dad is, but I think how he learned from his own father, who was not his biological father, but then some other things. So Shoff, kick it off.
Yeah, Randall Pearson, played by Sterling K. Brown.
Thank you.
Brilliant actor. Brilliant actor. One of my favorites. Love anything that he does. He's just intense, real. He's a really great actor. Yeah. And his portrayal of Randall is perfect because Randall really does embody all the best qualities of a millennial dad, someone who is invested in his children's lives, who works hard, who tries hard, who shows up as a husband, shows up as a father. He is a support. He's got two girls, and then also he adopts another girl, and this is one that she's had a very difficult life, very struggled a lot, and to see how he's there for a child that's not even biologically his own, but he's also paying that forward because he himself was adopted, and and then to see like him get a chance to interact with his biological father throughout the show, and kind of come to terms with that, and come into a really good place about it. It's just great. Randall always was such a wonderful character to watch and be like, kind of take notes from, be like, okay, I'm going to do it that way. And next time that happens with my kids, okay, I'm going to make sure I better do it like Sterling does it. Cause, yeah, he's excellent. And, other TV dads do it well too. Like Phil Dunphy from Modern Family. Great example of a kind of like Bandit, where like he's willing to be sort of like the butt of the joke, the slapstick, comedy part of being a dad. But he still has, it's very, very loving, very like heart-centered and focused. I love that.
But he still has command.
We really had a lot of great examples of great dads.
Yeah, he still has command of his home though, even though he's like the budding, and I don't mean like he's submit to me, that kind of command, but just like authority over his children, like, hey, you did something wrong, you need to face up to that, and as your father, it's my job to make sure you understand you were wrong, you made a mistake, and blah blah blah. So I mean, like kids tend to trust you more, and I think there's research on this. I don't know this for a fact, but like kids tend to trust you more and listen to you more the more relational you are with them.
Yeah.
And so when you do have that moment where you have to be the parent, and your voice gets firmer, and you get to be a little militaristic or whatever that word is you want to use, they listen. They listen. But when you're not relational with them, it's almost like, why should I listen to this person? Who are you? You know?
Right.
Yeah. And there's rebellion. This Is Us, Justin. You've got to watch that show. I think
Yeah.
you would really, really enjoy it. And hopefully we set it up well for you.
Yeah, I was going to say that everything you said is what I want to see in a television show. So now I got to watch this. This Is Us. Highly recommended by Shaw.
It came out on the heels of another show called Parenthood. That was on NBC,
yes, I remember
think,
that.
for like
Yes.
5 or
Yeah.
6 seasons or whatever. And but it's so much better. It's just better in every way.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me try to get my wife involved, because that's the majority of my television watching is something that she is interested in. So I got to get her to watch it, and then that guarantees me that I'm going to watch it. But speaking of my wife, we want to talk about our Christmases. This was the Christmas week this week, and the most wonderful time of the year. I always enjoy the holidays and people's spirits and everything. So I wanted to share my story real quick. We went over to my wife's parents' house, and we usually have dinner over there and open presents. We watch TV. This year was kind of different because they had the football game on Netflix this year. It was live on Netflix, and it was very interesting. After the debacle, Shaw, of the Tyson fight, the Jake Paul Tyson fight that was terrible. Shaw and I were talking to each other as it was buffering. It wasn't screaming; it was buffering.
Yeah,
most of the time,
like
more for
AOL
for you
especially,
buffering,
like
yeah. This one it went off without a hitch. It worked like flawlessly, like you would see a normal television broadcast. So the Chiefs and the Steelers, and then Houston and Baltimore. Really, to me, the best thing about that was Beyonce's halftime at the Houston game was amazing. I was like, this is way better than the game. First of all, the game was terrible, but that it was like a Super Bowl performance. Like the way the production value was astronomical. They have it on YouTube. You can watch it. Very great performance by Beyonce. So that was our. Oh, and then afterwards we went over to my wife's friend's house and we talked until the early morning light. We were playing some board games and having a good time over there, because it was all the parents were in one room and then all the kids were running around the house. They all were bonding together. So that was my Christmas experience this year. Mr. Jimmy Schaffman, how was your Christmas this year?
It started off kind of rough because we do Christmas Eve, like more stuff on Christmas Eve than we do Christmas Day. I know that some families are a little different in that respect, but prior to me going over to my ex-wife's house where my girls are, I had an altercation with my with my apartment person who lives below me, who I had to call the cops on. So
oh no,
he was making threats through my door at me. He was definitely like wishing harm on me, all because I was taking a shower. Is the best way I can describe it. He thought I was making a lot of noise. I don't make a lot of noise in the shower. I don't make a lot of noise in the shower. And he proceeded to like bang his ceiling, my floor, and was getting really, really upset. I went down and I knocked on his door. I was like, hey, could you stop shaking my apartment, please? And he was like, F you, I'll do whatever I want. Blah, 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 blah. It's Christmas Eve day, bitches. No. And so I left. I was like, all right, I'm just going to file a noise violation and let that be that. He comes up to my apartment 10 minutes later and he starts screaming through my door at me. And I'm like, at this point, 911. Yes, I know this is Christmas Eve day, but can you please get an officer, because this guy is going to kill me when I start bringing presents out to my car. And yeah, so anyways,
glad you're still alive, Shaw.
Yeah, I'm still alive. Got the presents
That's
over
wild.
to for my girls, and they had a wonderful holiday. They got all the things they wanted,
Nice.
and then some. But the real like fun moment was I decided I wanted a gift to be like a funny start, and so I got them whoopee cushions for Christmas.
You sent us videos on this.
Yeah. So like I got 3 whoopee cushions, smaller ones for my daughter Sage, who's 2.5, and I got 3 whoopee cushions for my other daughter, who's 4, Emily. And then I got a giant whoopee cushion for my ex. And I was blowing them up all night, and we were just all sitting on them and ripping some real tasty ones, and it was a lot of fun. They were laughing because all kids want to talk about is pee, poop, and farts. I picked the girls up from a homeschooling thing today, and as soon as they saw me, they said, "Hi, poo poo, dada," and I was like, "Okay, all right."
My son, when I was changing,
I feel like your girls and my boys could hang out. Shaw.
Yeah,
Like, Christian literally says the same thing, like, "Hello, daddy, poop poop head, poopy poop." and like I showed him the videos, by the way, of the whoopee cushions, and they laughed for about an hour. I had to keep playing them on replay. I had to airplane them to the TV. Like it was like they thought it was the most hilarious thing to see people sitting on whoopee cushions and hearing the fart sound.
That is so funny when you have things that are universal that can cross. We're in different states. We grew up differently, and my son is the exact same way. And it's not like he was influenced by television or anything. That's just naturally humans find farts funny and pee pee and poo poo funny. Like the Richard and fart jokes that we see in movies that we laugh at. Like we're still.
I was going to
laughing
say,
at
never
these things.
underestimate a good fart in a movie scene where you think it's like so out of place, but the writers are sitting there going, "This is a well placed fart scene. We got to make it work." Like in I think the Santa Claus 2, since we're talking about holidays and stuff, like Comet, he's OD'd on like tons of candy and he just rips one. My kids laugh every time, every time, and it's like as an adult you're like, it's a little immature, but it's not for us. It's for the children.
Right.
So
it is. It's just funny. Like I said, the same that yours said that you were the poo poo man. My son said that he was the poo poo man when I was changing his diaper. He's like, "I'm the poo poo man." Like, what? Okay.
All right.
We had some great times. And Kevin, speaking of home videos, you sent us the opening shot of your Christmas day.
Oh, yeah.
You're walking down the stairs. So tell us about your Christmas.
I'm a sucker for the reaction. I just love to see the whoa, that magic, and like I've been doing it ever since we started doing Santa with Christian, and I have all these videos. Hopefully one day I'll just make a collage, and like there'll be 18 years of
that would be great.
Reactions, which would be really cool. But yeah, it was cool. So, they walked down the stairs, they had their bluey jammies on, they held hands and walked into the living room. And, I was interested to see who was going to go where. So for those who won't see the video, because I'm not going to publish it anywhere, we had a big soccer goal set up, and inside the soccer goal was a bluey backpack and suitcase for Callan, an umbrella, and a Sonic watch for Christian.
Nice.
And then the Santa gift is it was a Hot Wheels Ultimate Garage. So Callan just goes right towards the Hot Wheels. Like he didn't see anything else. It was like Hot Wheels. He was all in. Christian dove right for the Sonic watch. And like that was so cool because like when you ask your kid like what do you want for Christmas, and it's like a week before Christmas or 2 weeks before Christmas, and you keep asking them and they keep saying the same thing over and over, you feel compelled like you got to get that thing. And for Christian it was the Sonic watch. Like that's what he's been talking about. So we got him the Sonic watch and he was super excited about it. And I think in the video, probably the funniest moment, Shaw pointed it out on our group chat, which was when my wife showed him the umbrella. He was just like, "Oh yeah, cool." And just
one of the gifts was an umbrella, but he was like, There's an Ultimate Garage over here. So
Yeah, Ultimate Garage,
whatever
and a
this is,
Sonic
you can keep
watch.
it.
Yeah. Actually, what was funny though, I went outside. It was much later. We were taking the soccer goal and putting it outside because it was taking up too much room, and it was started to rain. And Christian goes, "I have an umbrella." So he grabbed his new umbrella and he was like holding it like outside. So, that gift ended up coming in handy. So,
Nice.
yeah. So we had a great Christmas, great gifts, and for me, it's not about any of that. And I know it's in the title, Rev Kev. I won't get too preachy here, but to me, it's always reminding me what this season's about, right? And it's about love, and it's about joy, and not letting anything steal your joy, regardless of what's going on in life. So, it is about the birth of Jesus, who is, Emmanuel, God among us, or God with us, right? And coming down and allowing us to see what joy looks like. And so, that's what Christmas is for us. And we just had great family time and cooking and dancing. And I got danced with my wife outside under our little pavilion and lights, with the fire going, and just really, really nice, sweet time with the four of
Yeah.
us. So
And that's why I was saying I love this time of year. But it's also interesting. I think we should point out the change in before having children to after having children experiencing Christmas, because it goes from it's all about you and your reaction to the presents to it's all about their reaction.
Yeah.
And my son had that on this one specifically. The best moment of my entire Christmas was when the Christmas morning when I said, "Hey, what happened to the cookies and the milk?" And the light bulb in my son's head went off, and you could see the immense excitement. And ran to our bedroom. Mama, Santa ate my cookies and he ate my milk. And that, like, I wasn't prepared for my emotional reaction to that. Like, that was the first time last year he wasn't old enough to understand the concept of Santa Claus and to verbally express himself. This year, he could do both of those things. And it was just a tsunami. Like, everything, it was a perfect storm. Everything hit together. And he had a couple of those moments with his presents too. Like, the reaction of opening a present or seeing something, but it really was the the first thing was he saw the milk and cookies gone and realizing what happened, and telling all of the grandparents, the aunts and uncles that he saw that later that day. That was the best part of my Christmas. So I think
that's
it
great.
really is great to point out, like, the change as you become a father and you look at things through their eyes and then their reaction to things. It's a much different Christmas now than it was before.
Yeah.
I didn't even open gifts. It was like I did, like I didn't care about anything. Like, and there wasn't a lot for me anyway because I didn't, don't need anything, right? So it was like that feeling of just getting to watch them open their presents, and we try to pace things out so it's not too overwhelming throughout the day. But like, yeah, yeah. I mean, pre that, it's like, oh, what did I get? What did I get? What'd you get me, babe? And it's not about any of that. And so, yeah.
I will say that this year was tough for me
Hmm.
because not living together.
Yeah.
One thing that I was trying to mentally prepare myself for was that I wasn't going to get to see their reactions in the morning after Santa arrived.
Mm.
But and Kevin commented on he loves the reactions, and I do too. And it was so, like, hearing your story, makes me feel really good because I'm glad someone gets to witness that. But for me, it was kind of a somber moment because I had to hear about it from my ex, And apparently, how it had gone down was Emily, my oldest, had woken up first before Sarah and before Sage, and she proceeded to find the presents that Santa had left. And she's getting really good at recognizing her name. She's not like fully reading or anything, but she knows what her name looks like, and she can pick it out on a piece of paper. So she saw on the little name tag that there was a gift waiting for her. And then there was another gift that said her name, but it also had another name. And she went ahead and opened up her gift and opened up the one that was addressed to her and Sage before Sage and Sarah had even woken up.
Oh, wow.
And then once they were both up, then Sage got a chance to open up her gift. So thankfully, at least Emily did not open up Sage's gift from Santa. But it was a bummer for me to not be present for that. But at the same time, neither was Sarah and Sage. They missed out on Emily opening those gifts as well. So next year, maybe I'll see if I can stay over or something. I don't know. But like it was definitely, being that this was the first time, it just made me feel a little sad that I wasn't going to get that experience. So
yeah, I hope you do have a more like blended Christmas next year. That is like that.
We had a great time together. It's not like Sarah and I don't get along. We're good friends. We're great co-parents. We work really well together as a team. But I didn't want to impose and say, "Hey, can I stay over?" So like I kind of just accepted that there was going to be some limitations to what I was going to get to experience this holiday season.
Well, and I know they're not your kids, but hopefully the reaction videos of Christian and Callan gave you a little bit of warmth and joy.
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it. Thanks for sharing it. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a great topic. Like I said, talking about the difference in generations between the millennials and the ones that came before, as far as breaking stereotypes and creating those bonds with your children. Spending time is essential. You're not going to be creating bonds, spending a day with them. Out of 7 days, you spend 1 day and expect your child to be like, "Oh, I'm bonded for life. I'm just always around." It's the time and the effort and the consistency of being there for your child. That's the thing that creates that, that connection. So spending more time, I'm happy that the trend is now that millennial dads are spending more time, they're changing more diapers, and it's becoming, we're breaking those taboos or those barriers where, again, going back to my experience, when my wife's stepdad said, "You're changing a diaper," and was surprised. And it's not like he's a bad person, and you know I'm saying you should, you're a terrible guy, but in his generation, the way he grew up, that was normal. And so he didn't even think, "Oh, it's different for you as the next generation, or as one down the line, that you don't do it the way I did it." So it was just kind of eye opening for me at that moment. And I'm glad to see studies like this that show that it's changing and that people are starting to come around. So like I said, we will have it in our show notes if you're interested in the study. And Shoff, thank you very much for bringing this to our attention.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? We're 3 millennial dads, and we are practicing what we preach. I know, like when I'm over at Sarah's, I'm helping her with her dishes. I'm helping cook. I'm helping fold clothes. They're not even my clothes. I don't even live there, but I'm still helping because that's the kind of dad that I want to be. And that's the kind of co-parenting partner that I want to be. And I know that you guys do the same thing in your households. You do all you can to be equally involved and invested in your kids' lives.
I have good days and bad days on this, but hopefully more good than bad. And I just want to say that to the audience out there is 7,000 days from crib to college. When you really put that into perspective, there's not a lot of time to spend with your kids. So enjoy it, live it up, because then they're not kids anymore. And you go from being, that police, that cop, to coach, to college, or to cop, to coach, to advisor. Sorry, I screwed that up.
Kevin Call.
Yeah, and so you only get them for a little while, and every stage is going to be different, right? And so just I think the millennial dads, we put things in perspective, maybe, hopefully.
Yeah.
So
100%, Kevin. And I want to thank you and Shaw for being here and sharing your experiences and being vulnerable and not being an older generation, being the newer millennial generation. And I want to let all of our listeners know, if you have an experience, if you had a Christmas experience of being a father or being a parent, share it in our comments. Let us know, because we're always curious to see how you're relating to this material, or if there
yeah.
was a dad that you grew up with in entertainment, like, this is my dad, this is my TV dad, this is my movie dad that I looked up to. Let us know. We're always curious to hear your thoughts down below. Shoff, what do we have in store next week if our friends come back and join us?
So next week we're going to be touching on the man of the hour, because this man of the hour happens to be pretty super.
Woo!
That's right. We're talking about Superman. Specifically, we're going to
Yeah.
be talking about Christopher Reeve, because on Max, there is a documentary called Super/Man, and it's the story of Christopher Reeve. And we watched it recently. And one thing that was a surprise to us was the fatherhood element of it. And imagine being 40 something years old, having a 3-year-old, and suddenly becoming paraplegic and requiring a respirator and not being able to breathe on your own. Imagine being a father like that, and then you really understand what it means to be a Superman and a super dad. So I'm really excited. I know that Vactor and Kevin are really excited to talk about it and unpack the Christopher Reeve story, and just sort of like re-examine what it means to be a dad, but also like how you overcome adversity as a dad too.
Yeah, and Kevin and I were also excited to talk about Superman over at Fuse Film. Kevin.
Yeah, we just recently dropped our trailer reaction podcast. You can listen to that Spotify, Apple, or you can go watch the episode on YouTube, Fused Film, and check out what our thoughts were on the new Superman 2025 movie directed by James Gunn. Yeah, it's going to be great. I think we had a lot of great things to say about it. So Superman seems to be a big theme coming up in our lives as we go into the new year. So,
Oh, yeah. And as we go into the future, Shaw, how many miles per hour?
88 miles per